Today we're going to talk about the internet. So the internet is a massive part of the syllabus. So it takes up pages 45 to 46, and it's about an A4 page of content, which is crazy when you factor in to the point that animation is only half a page. So you're going to get asked a question about the internet in some way, shape, or form in your industrial technology multimedia test. There's no way around it, okay? So when we're talking about the web, there can be any number of things, but we need to tackle all of the things like images, video, audio, specifically from a web background, because it's very different to how we would do it offline and in traditional media channels. So going through the syllabus, the first thing that I have to address is the history and development of the World Wide Web. So the internet begins in the 1950s. It's basically a connection of different computers, and that's all the internet is at this stage. So it's a way for computers to interact with one another without having to physically remove some kind of storage medium from one place and take it over to another. So it comes about in computer science labs in the United States, the UK, and France, but the US Department of Defense awards contracts because they want to use it in war in some way, shape, or form. So in the 1960s, this is the development of something that's called ARPANET, developed by a guy named Robert Taylor. Lawrence Roberts was the person who managed it. So in 1969, they send the first message over ARPANET. ARPANET eventually becomes the internet or something similar to that. So packet switching networks exist before, well, around this period of time as well, and that's the idea of we can send packets of data between one computer, which eventually also becomes the internet. The Internet Protocol Suite, so the idea of IPs and IP addresses, starts around in the early 1970s, and this became the standard networking protocol. So before that, there were different types of networking. With this TCP/IP Internet Protocol Suite, we kind of switched towards a more standardized thing, which paves the way from it. In the early 1980s, we start getting more interconnectivity, and the internet starts becoming more than just a military thing, and ARPANET is decommissioned, so they stop using it in 1990. So at this point, America, late 1989, 1990, there's very limited civilian use of the internet that's starting. So in 1995, we get the final decommissioning of the internet as a purely army-based defense thing, and we can carry commercial traffic. So 1995 is where the internet as we know it today really exists, but before that we've got all this defense stuff. So you could say pre-1995 defense, post-1995 commercial, and that's really the amount of detail that you'd need to get into it. But you could drop some ARPANET and words like that. So CERN in Switzerland, CERN in the 80s, sets up hyperlink text documents. So that's links where you click on something that takes you somewhere else. So that 1980s in Switzerland. And we can't underestimate the effect that the internet has had on the world since it became commercial. The past 20 years especially, even the past 30 years, let's say, if we go back to like when it becomes commercial, have completely changed the way the world interacts with each other. We've almost hit the point now where globalization is near total. We're seeing the erosion of distinctive cultures. We're seeing a blending together of everything and an overall westernization of stuff. Countries that avoid this westernization have pretty much had to create their own internet. So we can look at ideas like China that really has a lot of prohibition and censorship and has created their own internet, because otherwise you basically can access any information at any point. The increase in speeds because of optic fiber cables have led to increases in data transfer that can do crazy amounts of information in effectively the speed of light. So we've changed from copper cables, which transmit data through sound, so at the speed of sound, 300 meters per second or thereabouts, to fiber optic cables, which transfer information through light, which can go through the speed of light. So when we switched to those light-based fiber optic cables, our information went crazy, and with that came the ability to transfer videos and audio and all kinds of information. And from there, it became viable to carry on businesses across different networks. We've got 1 to 10 gigabit, sorry, not byte, connections per second. And it's huge. So 1% of information was flowing through the internet in 1993 of the world's information. We're at 51% by 2000, and 97% of all information communicated was through these in 2007. So the internet just continues to get massive. It's developed from that small army-centered idea to this thing that just controls all of our lives at this point, and there's nothing we can do about it. So you may as well just lean into it and have fun with it. So what has the last 10 years brought for us? So this is 2019, so this is probably only relevant for this year and the next couple of years. So 2019, the last 10 years, we've seen the introduction of broadband internet. So before broadband internet, we were working with dial-up connections, meaning you had to effectively make a phone call every time you wanted to get onto the internet. You would use your home phone line, you would dial up, you would use a modem, it would squeak and all that sort of stuff, and then you would get onto it. You would get kicked off when your mum picked up the telephone, and we were looking at like 56 kilobytes per second, which doesn't really let you do anything. So at that point, the web was mostly text-based, very simple websites. YouTube doesn't exist, and the way that we interacted with the web was mainly static websites. You would go there, it was like opening a book. That's Web 1.0. We then develop into Web 2.0, which is the introduction of like comment systems and interactivity within the internet, and then we move on to whatever it is we're doing now. So some people are calling it Web 3.0, but we'll wait and see in retrospect and hindsight what happens with that. So cloud computing is another huge thing that's happened in the last sort of 5 years mainstream wise, but really the last 10 years as well. So the idea that you can store information in a server somewhere and access it remotely from any point through the internet has led to massive increases in productivity and changed the way that people work. So I can access any of my files from my work from my home computer, from work. I can change it, I can update it in real time, I can take those files, I can send them out to my students, we can collaborate, we can work together. That's beneficial. It's also negative because now I can work from wherever I am, so I can be asked something late at night and be expected to work on something. It can be positive though, because I have the ability to do that. You know, it's really the way you want to look at things. But that cloud computing has been the biggest change probably of the last 5 years. Just the idea now that we can remotely access anything and that nothing is saved on a device. If my laptop explodes tomorrow, I won't lose any files because no files are actually on my laptop. They're all on a cloud-based service, which can be downloaded anytime I have the internet. Now, of course, I need the internet for that. So let's get back to that. Shared resources and software as well through that cloud computing and through the internet. So now I can access my Unity account from a computer in my schoolroom. I can go home, I can access the same cloud project through there. I can have multiple people working on things at once. It's just completely changed. So at this point, we've got 6 billion people in the world. We've got 2 billion internet users. And I mean, it's growing every day. That fact and figure is from, we had 2 billion users in 2012, meaning now we've got a crazy amount more than that. If we look into 2017, which is the most recent statistics that I've got, we now have 354. Okay, so we're up 10% since last year. Yeah, we're getting close. We're getting close to decent saturation here. So the annual growth is we added 354 million in the last year. So if we're getting crazy growth of like 10% of the population every year, there's going to be a point in the future where pretty much everyone has access to the internet. So what does that mean? It means that information is now freely available to people all around the world. Education is essentially free. If you're watching this on YouTube, chances are you didn't pay for it. 10 years ago, this kind of textbook thing would have been sold in a bookstore for like $40, $50. Now it's free for anyone to watch on the internet. I don't care. Education is free now. Um, it's changing the way that we receive and work with information in a really interesting way. So we can talk about coding websites, but we don't need to. It's not in this syllabus. No matter what, though, we use HTML, hypertext markup language, and we use CSS, cascading style sheets. HTML is kind of like the bones of the site. CSS is the way that things look. You place your content in HTML and your overarching site structure. So like kind of like the bones, the divs, the divisions, the blocks where you put your information, and then you put a CSS sheet, and that's things like the fonts that you choose, the colors that things go with, and the overall look of your site. Now, the reason that you do that is because you can apply a CSS sheet to any number of HTML pages. So if I decide that I want to change the background from, I don't know, red to pink, instead of having to go through every page of HTML of my website, I can just change the CSS file that the HTML references, and every page changes automatically. It's just best practice, and it keeps things consistent across your web pages. That's really all we really need to know about that. But let's move on to the second point of the syllabus for web, and that's appropriate usage. So you've got access to all information in the world. You can put up whatever you want, and there aren't really that many laws that govern what you can do. As an example of law not really working on the internet, the Australian government tried to make the Pirate Bay, which is a torrenting website, illegal. Torrents usually put up pirated material, so stuff that they don't own the copyright to. We'll talk about copyright in Australia in a later video. The best the Australian government could do is ban the Pirate Bay's website address. Okay, so so that means that people in Australia can't access the piratebay.org or whatever it is that the Pirate Bay was using. So what people did was they just created an address which redirected to the Pirate Bay's website under a different web address. Not blocked anymore. It's really hard to make things illegal on the internet. And even if you do make things illegal on the internet, chances are people will just use a browser like Tor and go onto the dark web and find it anyway. So appropriate usage is really, at this point, an honor system thing. The idea is that you know what's right and you know what's wrong, and hopefully you make the right decision, but I can't sit here and ask you to do the same thing, because I'm sure that in the past I've done some things. I've downloaded some stuff on the internet that I probably shouldn't have when I was younger, like, music and stuff like that. Not going to tell you what I downloaded, because that would be embarrassing. But anyway, when we're talking about appropriate usage of the internet, we kind of got to talk about like age controls, following laws, all of that sort of stuff. But first off, we need to talk about web standards. So we want to use the W3C, the World Wide Web Consortium's standards of actual naming and setting out of pages. So what that'll do is it'll make sure that everything works everywhere. So that's a pretty basic appropriate usage. Of that, we need to make sure that we follow copyright rules. So we need to make sure that we're not stealing other people's content where at all possible. Now, the internet is full of people stealing other people's content, and there's not really anything that can be done about it. You can put a cease and desist up. So if you put a cease and desist up, you can say, please take the stuff down. If the person chooses not to do that, it really depends on what country that person's in, because different countries have different laws about copyright. For example, China at present, I'm pretty sure, doesn't have laws about copyright. So a lot of the pirated stuff that you can see may actually have its servers located in China or Russia or somewhere that doesn't deal with that sort of thing. And then you kind of don't really have much recourse. You just have to kind of deal with it. In Australia, if you have something uploaded that's copyrighted and you put up you want to get it taken down, usually you can get it taken down. But if you take something down on the internet, it'll spring up somewhere else in a couple of days anyway. The main problem is that internet technology is developing faster than laws can be made. So laws take a long time to be put into place because they have to cover all of the potential pitfalls that that law would involve. So we can't make a law, for example, that just flat out says that you can't copy stuff off the internet. Because what about if I own it already? So as an example, what if I'm merely making a backup of a product that I already own? So we could consider that that would be a necessary, something that's allowed. I'm allowed to make a copy of a music CD onto my computer to put on my MP3 player, or I can make a backup in case my CD gets scratched. Now, most people would say that's fair, but that means that we can't make a law against copying songs off music CDs. Not that we even use CDs anymore, but I digress. Because if you made it illegal to take music off a CD, then it would be illegal to use a program like iTunes or something similar to rip that music off the CD. So we can't make that the law. So what do we make the law then? That we can't upload music files to a torrent. Okay, well now this becomes even more interesting because a music file is made of binary because it's digital, right? So if the music file is not 100% the music file with the codec and the container and everything that we've talked about, then it's ones and zeros and won't play. So the only way that you could say that you were pirating music is if you directly uploaded that entire musical file and gave it to someone else directly. Now a torrent is not like that. A torrent sends little packets of data, ones and zeros, and those ones and zeros are nothing until they get recombined together into the downloader's computer. So if you don't upload 100% of that digital file to somebody else's computer, then one could argue that you did not pirate that music and send it to them. One could argue that you merely gave them ones and zeros. So did you upload the pirated content? Maybe not. In fact, the only person that's guilty in that situation is the person who downloaded the music. Now, one could also argue, but probably not successfully, that you are merely downloading ones and zeros that, surprise, surprise, at the end, turned into a musical file. Who knows? Now, an example of that in Australia was, well, you also need to know who it's coming from. And if it's coming from multiple sources, it can be difficult to chase down, especially if not every one of those sources lives in the area. What I'm saying is that copyright is super tricky on the internet. Dallas Buyers Club is an example from the past few years where a movie studio tried to command a internet service provider to give the detail of the people who downloaded their movie illegally from torrents. So a company, TPG in Australia, who is a internet service provider, basically told them, no, we're not giving you the addresses of our users who downloaded this file illegally. We're just not going to do it. And it held up in court. So what the movie makers tried to do was they just sent an email to the people that downloaded it saying, we are going to sue you, pay us a lot of money. But in the end, nothing could happen. It's strange. But there have been examples in the past where it has been taken into court and the person who downloaded music did lose and they had to pay a crazy amount of money. So there was a band, Guns N' Roses, they put out an album called Chinese Democracy and somebody stole the songs from them. And surprise, surprise, they got $50,000 per song in copyright fees, which is what it always says you can get, but you just always assume that it's never going to happen to you. So it gets confusing. Now, we're running long on this, but I want to talk about age controls and censorship. So age controls are pretty much impossible to work with on the internet. So you need to be 18 to sign up to a YouTube page. Or you can be 13 if you have your parents' permission. Now, how do you get your parents' permission to sign up to a YouTube page? Well, there's no way to prove it. You just write in, I have my parents' permission. But how many YouTube channels can you think of right now that are like toy opening channels where there's like a 4-year-old that owns the YouTube channel? Now that's technically illegal according to YouTube, but they're not doing anything to stop it. To own a Twitter account, you need to be 13. For some reason, you can have a Tinder account when you're 13. Now, I don't even understand what the deal is with that, but that's weird. WhatsApp, you need to be 16. I'm trying to think of things that are still relevant because this site of age restrictions I have here for social media accounts is from 2016, and nobody really wants a Vine access account anymore. It doesn't even exist. But we're trying to make the internet safe. Why are we trying to make the internet safe? Because the internet is an amazing place to be unsafe, especially from the safety of your own home. You can be a real creep on the internet if you want to be, and we're trying to stop that from happening. But, it's difficult. Copyright is difficult on the internet. Age restrictions are difficult on the internet when you can just click through them. You get asked, are you this age? And I can just go, yes. No follow-up. I'm straight on whatever website I want to be on. That's problematic. Another thing that we need to talk about is censorship. So, violence, sex, language. When you can put up anything on the internet, anybody can access it, all right? So the way that we get around a lot of these violent videos, sexual videos, and videos with poor language, I guess, if you care about that sort of thing, are opt-in boxes. So we say this may have explicit or offensive content. Do you want to watch it? And you just click yes. Now, you can lie about your age when you sign up to a website. You can lie about your age when you create an email, and you can basically go in. And I hear stories from people that I teach all the time about them lying to websites when they were younger, so they could get onto it. Because what happens if you don't lie about your website and you put your real age in? We can't get on. So you restart the process and you change your age until you can get in. And we can just talk about how flawed those systems are, because these guys were like 8 years old and they were stupid enough to put their birth year in. So they would say things like, whoever, 2001, the year they were born in, at whatever.com. That's the email that they set up. So anybody that looked at that would instantly know that they're not the right age, but nobody's looking at it except a computer. And they've already talked about the age they are when they sign in. And of course, they read the terms and conditions. No, they didn't. But the terms and conditions stated that they said that they were not lying. So there's no legal recourse if a parent finds that a child has signed into a site because they've waived it in the terms and conditions that nobody read. It's very strange. Okay, so I'm going to end off today with the do's and don'ts of internet browsing, and you can bring these up in if you have to talk about safety of the internet or any of that sort of stuff, or ethics or anything like that. So the first thing you want to do is not publish information that identifies you. If you have information that identifies you, where you live, your age, your real first and last name, it's very easy to steal your identity, okay? You need a first and a last name, date of birth, and an address if you have one, and someone can pretty much set up a credit card in your name, no problem. So another thing is hard to decipher passwords. So making your password 123, it can pretty much be hacked by anybody, okay? And using different passwords on different accounts is also really important. So for example, if you have the same password on your phone banking or internet banking as you do on your PlayStation 4 account, chances are somebody already has your banking information. Because the PS4 accounts get hacked, or they have been hacked in the past. If you've got the same password for different things, then you really have to be careful about that. Try not to upload inappropriate content if you can help it. It can always be tracked to you. You will get caught if it's something illegal. It's tracked to your IP address. Just don't do it. Know your privacy settings. So, if you're still using Facebook at this point in time, you should know what your privacy settings are. So if people can see everything about you, people can see everything about you. So you need to know and agree to the privacy settings of whatever you put in. It doesn't matter how private you want to be. You just need to either agree or disagree with it. The first thing, the most important thing pretty much is stop and think before you do it. Just either do or don't, but don't just do something impulsively. If something's on the internet, it's there forever. And that's really becoming a problem now with social media and things that get archived. We've seen people fired from multi-million-dollar movie contracts for jokes that they made 10 years ago on Twitter. You're gonna get found out, all right? Even if you think it's gone, someone screenshot it and it's somewhere just waiting for the worst, most inopportune time to bring it up. We're in a generation now where mistakes that we make can haunt us forever very easily, and we're also in a generation where people like to jump on that and ruin people for the things that they've said in the past, even jokingly. Just don't do it. Problem solved. You can and will be tracked, and it will come up again. Finally, don't use a computer that doesn't have proper security on it. If you're using a VPN as an example to, watch videos that you're not supposed to be doing at school anyway, chances are that people can see what you're typing. If you haven't paid for your VPN, chances are it's a keylogger, which is just like taking down everything you've written. If it sounds too good to be true, it probably is. Make sure you have proper security on your computer. It's easy enough to hack your computer, so you don't want to make it even easier for someone, is what I'm saying. All right. Next lesson, we're going to move on to the implications of the World Wide Web on multimedia. And I think we've kind of done a good background of the internet, so now we need to move on to how we can best show our content on there. So thank you for listening.